Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining our webinar today. My name is Kathy Sheffers, and I'm on the marketing team at Goodheart-Willcox. I'm joined by my colleague, Erin Brennan, who is the GW Acquisitions Editor for Transportation, Agriculture, Welding, Manufacturing, and Machining. I'm also joined by my marketing colleague, Katrina Pilo. And I know there are a number of GW editors and educational consultants who are joining us today. So on behalf of the whole GW team, we're so excited to be joined by Jim Jozwiak, author of Industrial Hand and Power Tools, a new first edition resource that will be available very soon for you and your students. Before we dive in, I just wanted to share a few quick housekeeping items. You are in listen-only mode, but please feel free to enter questions and feedback in the chat and in the question box anytime. And Katrina will be monitoring the chat box, and Jim will be happy to answer any questions throughout the webinar and during our Q&A at the end of the session. So Industrial Hand and Power Tools is an exciting new resource for today's manufacturing and industrial tech students. It was written to serve as a primary textbook for a course dedicated to tools, or as a companion textbook for a course with significant tool coverage. Our attendees noted in their registration form that some of you do offer dedicated tools courses, and many of you also integrate tool education into your core curriculum. To say there was a great need for this resource is an understatement, and Jim will give you insight into his need to create this resource in a few minutes. So as I mentioned, I'm very happy to introduce new author Jim Jozwiak. Jim brings 40 years of experience in education-related roles while working for Micron and Intel. He earned master's degrees in electrical engineering and in adult and organizational learning. Upon what he thought was going to be retirement, he was recruited in the mechatronics program at the College of Western Idaho. And he is, of course, author of the new Industrial Hand and Power Tools. So welcome, Jim. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about yourself and also provide us that fun story, firsthand insight into how and why you developed this new textbook.
Okay. Well, thanks, Kathy. I've never written a book before, so I was pretty excited when GW agreed to take on my project. And here we are 2 years later, and it's finally coming to fruition. So so you can read my bio about my experience and degrees and such, but tools have always been a part of my life. It started when I was a very young boy with my dad, who taught me much of what I know, and certainly instilled in me a love and appreciation for what tools can do. As Kathy said, I made an attempt to retire a few years ago. Instead, that just became a career change into the College of Western Idaho, and I was asked to teach right away some introductory courses in electronics. That was pretty much right up my alley. And then also to develop and teach a 3-credit course in hand tools that was requested by our technical advisory committee. They were seeing our graduates were not as skilled in tool usage as they wanted them to be. And so this course was created focused on tools to be offered in the first semester of the program. And right away, as I began to figure out how I was going to do that, I really couldn't find a suitable textbook. In talking to my supervisor about it, he said, well, if you can't find one, why don't you write one? In the beginning, I started just collecting materials for the class, and but then after a couple semesters of teaching, I did start pulling those materials together into what I thought could be a book. And I figured if I had the need, hopefully maybe there might be others out there with the need as well. And as I started down the road and working with my colleagues, I learned that many of them have tool dedicated classes, but others have classes in which tools play a big part. And in those conversations, we agreed that this book could be useful in that mode as well. My 15 years working at Micron was in workforce development, and that was largely working with equipment technicians And even in that role, a book like this would have been useful. So I can see this even going beyond educational institutions and going into industrial workforce development. So as I've been teaching this course, I've now encountered well over 100 students in their first semester of the College of Western Idaho's mechatronics program. And I was surprised to learn that a lot of the students today just have not been given a basic understanding of how to use tools, whether it was with their dad or in some other way. I'm finding students who have not ever used a socket wrench or a hacksaw, let alone any kind of power tool. And so I wrote this book with largely those students in mind, trying not to leave out any basics, making sure that they develop good best practices and safety habits and techniques and so on, assuming that they really have no background. So that's kind of the story.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim. That's a great story, and we appreciate you putting this together for us and for the industry and the education. So behind every great author is a group of subject matter experts who serve as reviewers. And Jim had a team of 72 individuals from 31 states across the country who shared their time and expertise with us. We're happy to recognize them here today, and a special shout out to the reviewers who are highlighted in yellow who are participating in the webinar with us. Jim, I know you'd love to say a few words about your reviewer team.
Yeah. I mean, I really can't say enough about how much I appreciate the work that the reviewers contributed to this. I put together what I thought was a good first draft, and as it went out to the reviewers, they didn't hold back, and they told me all the things that needed to be changed. They pointed out tools that I had omitted that should have been included. They corrected many mistakes that I had in there. Helped me to include content that I just didn't have there originally. It just really, I thought it was pretty good when I put the first draft together, but between the edits that we made based on the reviewer feedback and my fabulous editors, Aaron and Laura, there's just no comparison to the book as it was and the book as it is. And I think I feel like it's a really good product now. And quite frankly, I'd be a little embarrassed to have released it as it was in its first draft. So again, I thank my reviewers and my editors for that quantum leap in improvement.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And not only did you have all of those reviewers providing feedback, but you mentioned to me last week that you shared this content and used it with your students who also have provided you feedback on your book. And we have some of their feedback sprinkled throughout today's webinar with information that your students shared through a survey. So again, yes, for all of us, thank you to all of the reviewers. If you're on the call today and you would love to participate as a reviewer in the future for us, if you want to just put a little note in the chat box, Aaron would be very involved with connecting you with the editorial team, and we'd love to have you join us as a reviewer. So thank you again, and welcome if you'd like to join us. So Goodheart-Willcox appreciates the value of industry credentials, certifications, and accreditation. We are pleased to partner with leading organizations to support students in programs in achieving credentials. Our partners at NIMS recognized the value in Jim's book, noting that the tools covered are essential in a wide range of industry sectors and that tasks cannot be executed without the use of these tools. Candidates must be skilled and knowledgeable in the use of these industrial hand and power tools to earn the NIMS credentials. We invite you to visit the NIMS website at nims-skills.org to explore their interactive standards viewer to learn more about it. Also, in the front matter of Jim's book, there'll be some recognition from Montez King, who's the executive director at NIMS, But again, we're pleased with the partnership and how nice to have them recognize Jim's book as being so relevant, to those credentials and certifications for students. And here we are at the table of contents. And just to kind of give you a little background before Jim shares some more information on this, Industrial Hand and Power Tools is a foundational, comprehensive text designed to help students identify, select, properly use, and care for the common hand and power tools used in industrial and manufacturing careers. The content focuses on tool care, storage, safety, tool physics, measurement, basic hand tools, fasteners, and power tools. Jim, can you walk us through the table of contents and share with instructors how they might utilize your book in their programs and why you have it organized the way you do?
Sure, I'd love to. Kathy, can you advance forward to the pyramid slide?
I sure can. There you go.
So early on, as I was trying to decide what tools to include and what tools not to include, I created this picture that you see here that I call the tool pyramid. And what I figured out is that tools kind of fall into three general categories. So there are highly specialized tools. The analogy that I use here is tools, for example, that auto mechanics would use to work on a Ford Mustang. Okay. And that sits at the top of the pyramid, and those are certainly not included in my book. In the middle of the pyramid is what I call trade specialized tools. So these would be a little bit more general tools that would be used by auto mechanics across any auto brand. And those two are not included in my book. But I realized that there's a very large collection of tools that sit at the foundation, the basic hand tools that are needed and used by pretty much every trade, every industrial career or technician needs to know about common wrenches, pliers, screwdrivers, hammers, etc. And so that's really what industrial hand and power tools, that's what is included in that table of contents, is as much of those foundational tools as I could. Then Kathy, yeah, thank you. And then so back to the table of contents, once I kind of figured out what needed to be included, then it really just amounted to grouping those into chapters. And you can see that there's 28 chapters here. And the organization of the chapters kind of fell out naturally. You can see the progression from measurements to hand tools and then to power tools. And then I also wanted to include coverage of fasteners, and that seemed to fit best after we had talked about the hand tools involved in fasteners. So that's kind of how the order came together. I will admit it's not the order that I use when I teach my own class. I've actually rearranged the content just a little bit for my own class, and I think it is flexible enough to be able to do that. There's no particular reason you need to talk about wrenches before pliers and so on. Obviously, the introductory stuff needs to come first, but after that, I think the order is pretty flexible. So just to give you an example, in my own class, I grouped together hand saws and power saws in the same week because essentially the lab that we do involves both tools, and the comparison of how easy it is to cut something with a handsaw versus a power saw. And then also we have a mid-semester project that we do that requires some soldering and it requires some power drill work. And so I have to cover those earlier in the semester for that. So there's no sacredness to the order that you see here. It seemed like a logical way to present the material, but it's very, very flexible as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it's great for especially our instructors who might be integrating your content if it's not a dedicated course. How nice to have that flexibility worked in, and nice that you're using it in an order that suits you. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
We'll pass Go ahead.
And if I could just say one more thing about the table of contents. So um, I do think that there are at least two chapters here that are pretty unique that you are not likely to find in other books on tools, and those are chapters 4 and 5. So I have a dedicated chapter on tool and fastener materials and a dedicated chapter on tool physics. And so these are presented in an introductory way with very little math, but trying to get across the concepts that pliers bring the advantage of a lever arm, and a longer handled set of pliers is going to be easier to work with than a shorter handled set of pliers. And so I had this physics chapter that essentially lays out those foundational principles. And then similarly, the materials chapter talks primarily about different types of steels, but also other materials. And then in the later chapters, I refer back to the concepts in those two chapters. So in the fasteners, we talk about different types of steel that make up fasteners and so on. So I just wanted to point out that kind of unique thing.
Absolutely. I'm glad you did. Thank you. So speaking of flexibility and also consistency, I guess, there's a deliberate consistency among the tools chapters that was developed by Jim and his editors. Jim, do you want to share the importance of making sure that these topics were included in each of these tools chapters?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to make sure that it was comprehensive. I didn't want to leave anything out. It was helpful to have a standard format to begin each chapter with an overview of what the tools do, and then to have sections on very specific types of those tools. To have a dedicated section on safety, a dedicated section on care and storage. And then every chapter also has a very short paragraph at the end that says, of these 17 different types of pliers that we talked about, obviously you can't carry around a toolbox with every tool that's going to be in that book, but if you're going to be selective, here's the 3 that we recommend. And then that's actually tied together in an appendix at the end of the book. In Appendix A, I have a couple different versions of recommended tool sets.
Excellent. And as I mentioned that we were going to sprinkle some of the student feedback throughout the session today, one of Jim's students said, I appreciated how consistent the chapter organization was, and the content was thorough without getting too into the weeds of specific use cases. So nice to hear directly from your students on this. So we're going to walk through a complete chapter to give you kind of a sneak peek of what these chapters look like, and as we wait for the sample to be available for all of you. We're starting with the Unit 3 opener. So it's a unit opener that contains a number of chapters. You'll see that the list of chapters is included in the unit opener, as well as a nice introduction to the complete unit that sets the stage. And at this point, I just wanted to mention also another comment from one of Jim's students. He said, I've used hand and power tools for most of my life, but I feel like I have a much better understanding of the tools and processes far beyond basic use and function. So that might even speak to the physics chapter, Jim, or some of the other information that you've included in the chapter. But I thought that was really nice comment from one of your students as well.
Yeah, it was nice. As I said, I wrote this with the novice in mind, but I've had a number of students who really do have a good background and understanding in tools, and most of them have told me that they did learn something.
I read that too in the student feedback. I thought that was a perfect balance. So here's chapter 8, and the chapter openers are designed with the learning outcomes, the technical terms, and an overview of the chapter content. Some key notes as you take a look at this page: the learning outcomes are tied to the specific sections of the chapter and also to the end of chapter content. So you'll see 8.1 through 8.12, which show you the learning outcomes in which sections those learning outcomes are going to be covered. Many of you in your registration form indicated that you use online textbooks with your students, and for instructors and students who end up using Jim's book in an online format, it's nice to know that those technical terms will link to e-flashcards, matching activities, and Jeopardy-style games that give those students some engaging and fun ways to really learn those technical terms. Jim, do you want to speak any more about the chapter opener or anything that on this page?
Well, maybe just, as we go through this chapter, you'll notice that there are a lot of images. So the book wasn't just about writing a bunch of text, but it was about collecting, I believe at last count, well over 600 images for the whole book. And many of those images were photos that I took in my own lab with my own students or with other folks, but it's nice to know that they were homemade, so to speak. So
absolutely. So as we flip through the sample chapter, you'll see those section numbers that align with those learning outcomes that I just mentioned in the chapter opener. And as Jim mentioned, you'll find many charts, figures, and images. You'll also see that the content is broken up in chunks to make it more student friendly. The green box up at the top, not too wordy, not too complex, did not feel long. I think that's a wonderful student testimonial for the content, that they really liked the amount of content that you had and the way it was organized, so it never felt too wordy to them.
It's a tough line to walk, to include enough content to be comprehensive, but not to get long and boring. So
exactly. Well, I think you achieved it. It does super visual image-rich text, makes it easy for students to clearly identify the right tool for the job. And as Jim mentioned earlier, a lot of students are new with this. They don't come to class with a lot of tool identification skills in place. So these images are super helpful for those, especially for those beginning students. And then there are step-by-step instructions that you'll see at the top there that describe the proper use of many tools. Do you want to talk at all about some of those step-by-step procedures, Jim, and how they're weaved into the chapters?
I think it kind of speaks for itself. It is included along with pretty much every tool, how it should be properly used. In many cases, I would group tools together and speak in a little bit more general terms. So not necessarily a procedure for every individual tool.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And I know that there was a big emphasis on safety, and you'll see these caution boxes throughout the text and safety tips that provide that strong emphasis on safety to protect the workers and the equipment. And then there are pro tips that offer advice and guidance, especially applicable for on-the-job situations. In the green box, again, another student noted, I really liked the sections that covered in detail how a tool is used. It never came across as talking down because it was there from the first chapter and made me appreciate that while some things seem obvious, having it explained why you don't do certain things that could be dangerous or inefficient helps solidify in my mind how to use the tools. So another great student comment. You've got to be loving all of those, Jim.
I don't mind them. Kathy, you mentioned about the cautions and the pro tips and the safety tips, and I just want to say that I'm pretty sure that's a standard GW textbook thing, and I love it because there are these little nuggets of information that these tips provide a means to get highlighted that otherwise would, I think, just get lost in the text.
I think you're right, absolutely, and you're right. Safety is always important with any of these disciplines. And the pro tips, what I like about those too is these students are all preparing for careers, and they really provide some relevant advice to them that they'll use in your classes and also as they start their careers. So I'm glad you like those as well. Again, so many images. So this just, as we lay out this chapter, every time I flip through the pages, I'm just amazed in how student-friendly the book is laid out. Again, here's some more caution statements, another step-by-step procedure, this one on the proper use of socket wrenches. And students with little or no experience with regards to tools need to see these tools, as we mentioned, was why it was so important to make this text so visual. And again, as Jim mentioned, the pro tips, providing that great advice to students that's featured on this page here. And again, many images and more caution statements. And then I wanted to make a note too that the figures and procedures are all located at the point it is covered in the reading. I always love to share that GW is fairly unique in that we have an in-house editorial team and an in-house creative team. We don't ship it out to other countries to create the books. They're really done together with Jim and with his own editorial and production team. And we're very diligent about making sure that the content flows well with the images, and students aren't required to flip through pages to find the correct figure, on a different page than where that content is being covered. So that's really a nice attribute of all of the books, and it's certainly true here with Jim's with all of these images that are included. Again, his student mentioned the images were a great support. It was a good mix of text and images. So I couldn't write these any better myself. Your students had some great insight. As we go through this page, I'll just do another student note. It said, I think for a novice with no experience, it's not intimidating, and it doesn't speak down to inexperience, while at the same time it's technical enough and has a large enough variety to capture the attention of students with experience. So again, they're reinforcing, how you laid out the book, and neat that it's being recognized that way. And here again, we all know students love visuals, and this student mentioned visuals help me learn, and there were a good number of them. I like each tool having at least one visual and a subsequent image showing any additions or uses of the tool. And then Jim, I think you mentioned it earlier, but that last section about which wrenches should you have in your toolbox, in this section on wrenches, I think that's what you were referring to, right? When you talked about them being able to build their own toolbox with recommended tools.
Yep. I think every technician should build their own personal toolbox.
Absolutely. And then at the end of every chapter, you're going to find a summary, know and understand questions, apply and analyze questions, and critical thinking questions. You'll see there all of the parentheses with the 8.1, 8.3, and again, those tie to those learning outcomes that tie to the sections and then tie to this end of chapter. So it really provides a nice reference point for students and instructors as they're looking at questions and need to maybe reread something. It's easy for them to go back and find a section where that information was covered. Jim, is there anything you want to share about the end of chapter content or how you might have used it with your students?
Maybe a little. So each week in my class, I assign generally 2 chapters. There's 28 chapters in the book, and in a 15-week semester, that actually works out pretty good. That's just by accident. I didn't plan that. But so each week there are 2 new chapters that introduce 2 new categories of tools. And I assign those as a reading assignment to be done by before they walk into class on Monday. And then on Monday, I deliver a short lecture. We then go into the lab, and I have something of a show and tell where I have the tools all laid out, and I essentially just introduce them to all the different types of wrenches, etc. I will say that I built up a pretty comprehensive tool set in my lab over the last few years. So I have samples of almost everything that is in this book. And then the rest of the week, we do hands-on activities on those tools. I assign them these homework problems that you're looking at here, then to be turned in the following Monday. So there's kind of a nice cadence that happens.
That's nice, and students know what to expect. I also love this identification test where they need to identify the names of the tools that are pictured there. Students, did they like that section?
Yeah. They seem to.
Yeah,
I would say they
absolutely.
probably like that part more than the other homework problems, but yeah.
Right. That's excellent. And then you mentioned the hands-on activities, and these are included also at the end of the chapters that actively engage students as they put tools into practice in the workshop and answer questions to reflect on their results. Competency test tables are provided so that students have a clear understanding of expectations and instructors have ready-made grading criteria. I know you just talked about some of the hands-on activities with your students. Now that we have it shown here for our audience, is there anything else you'd like to talk about as far as these hands-on activities?
The only thing I want to say is that most of these have been road tested. Long before I started on this book, I was already doing these in my lab and tweaking them and making them better from semester to semester. So what's written in here is what I use, and it's already proven to work pretty well.
That's wonderful. That's fantastic. And I saw that at the end of the activity, there's the reflection for the questions. And I think that's wonderful for students to be able to go back and to be able to provide that reflection and answer questions based on it. And then finally, that instructor evaluation criteria. Anything you'd like to share from an instructor point of view for the criteria and the rubrics that are available for instructors?
I think it's just good to be consistent about what we're looking for, and to be sure that all the bases are covered, to be sure that all the safety procedures are being followed and personal protective equipment is being used, and best practices, etc. I think it just makes sure that all the boxes are checked.
Absolutely. It's nice to have it organized. Instructors don't have to create this themselves. So I've mentioned earlier about the different resources that will be available to you. Jim's Industrial Hand and Power Tools will be available as a write-in physical textbook. I noted one other student comment when I was thinking about the print textbook, and the student said, I referred back to the textbook several times as a reference point during labs and in preparation for the final. And I thought, I know we hear a lot with students, even as they begin their careers, to hang on to certain books like this as a reference. So I think this one would come in so handy for students moving forward. So if you have students that prefer printed textbooks, it's available as a write-in textbook. It's also available as an online textbook. There's a video library, which we'll talk about in a minute. There's also a virtual toolbox with images and descriptions of the tool. So they're like flashcards, but a virtual deck of cards that, like I mentioned, have the full images and the description. So just another way to help students with those tool identification skills. And as I mentioned earlier, with the technical terms at the beginning of the chapter, there are e-flashcards, matching activities, and a Jeopardy style game that I know students and instructors really love all of those. It's just a quick, easy, low stakes interactive activity that students can do either in the classroom or on their own. And then for you as instructors, you would be receiving, when you adopt Jim's book, all of the student resources, plus lesson plans, answer keys, PowerPoint presentations, an image library, which I think in this case will be amazing because of all the images that are in the book. It allows you to use those images from the textbook as you might customize your own PowerPoints or handouts, quizzes, anything else. So that's a really nice value-added asset. And then GW just came out with GW Assessment, which is a new cloud-based assessment platform that's especially exciting when you use this book in a learning management system like a Canvas or Blackboard, and it allows you to have auto-graded quizzes, including those end-of-chapter questions. So it's a super convenient way for you to assign and create assessments. So more to come on that down the road, but I wanted to let you know that. So that's the complete package. And then, as I mentioned, there are dozens of videos included with these resources. What a great way for your students to see these tools in action. Jim, do you want to talk a little bit about the videos?
Yeah, that was quite a project. Myself and one of my former students, I did want a little variety and not just have me in all the videos. So myself and one of my former students got together over this last Christmas holiday with a professional production team that was hired by GW, and we spent about 25 hours in my lab shooting almost 40 videos on the different tools. I had to write all the scripts for them in advance. It was a big project, but I think they came out well.
Absolutely, a big payoff that will reap wonderful rewards for students. So I'm going to hop off of the PowerPoint for a minute, Jim, and I have a couple of those videos that we can share with our audience to let them know about those. So
I will demonstrate a clicker torque wrench. To begin with, to use a torque wrench, you need to have a full socket set, including the adapters, extenders, and sockets themselves that you would normally use with a socket wrench. Be sure that you select the exact size socket for the fastener that you are using. Mount the socket wrench to the torque wrench along with any accessories that may be needed, and then set the torque wrench for the proper torque. In this case, we are setting the torque wrench for 15 foot-pounds of torque. Here I have the nut bolt assembly secured in a vise, so a backing wrench is not needed. However, use a backing wrench if necessary. Mount the socket securely onto the head of the bolt and pull the torque wrench toward you just as you would a socket wrench. And continue to tighten using the ratchet mechanism. Then, when the assembly becomes tight, your torque wrench will make an audible click. This is an indication that you have reached the target torque that you have set on the wrench.
The tools for this job are a tap and tap wrench, which can be found in a tap and die set. Today, for our demonstration, we'll be creating internal threading for the placement of a bolt that has a 1/4 inch diameter and 20 threads per inch.
What's the difference between a power drill and an impact driver? They both seem to look pretty much the same to me, says our friend in Canada, Jim.
A power drill just uses an electric motor to turn the spindle that has the chuck that the drill is attached to, and is limited to the amount of power that the motor can generate, which in some cases can be a lot of power. And when using a power drill, especially if you are, for example, using it to insert fasteners and the fastener starts to get tight, or maybe you're drilling a hole and the drill bit gets stuck, the power of the motor suddenly gets transferred to your wrist, and there you can actually get injured as a result. With an impact driver, there's an internal spring. You're right, it looks similar to a power drill and behaves similar to a power drill. You can do similar things. An impact driver is mostly used for fasteners. It isn't used so much for drilling. But the internal spring provides percussion force in addition to the rotation force of the motor, and can generate more torque on the fastener than a power drill can, but that does not get transferred to your wrist. And so as the fastener begins to tighten, it's essentially hammering on the fastener, tightening it further, but you're not feeling any of that tension transferred to your wrist.
That was wonderful. And then we also have a question from Link. Link says that so glad to have lab suggestions. Maybe Jim, you could talk through a little bit the labs, but the question is too, are there any complicated assemblies where they have to really think what tool, etc., to use?
I would say the fasteners assembly kind of falls in that category. The fasteners, the activity for the fasteners involves assembling, putting together just 2 metal plates that have a series of holes drilled in them of different sizes, and then you're told that one needs to have a hex head bolt, and another one needs to have a socket head bolt, and another one needs to have a lock nut, and another one needs to have a lock washer, and they need to essentially sort all that out and figure all that out. I would say the assembly itself is not all that complicated, but it does really require a lot of distinction between different types of tools and fasteners.
Got it. No, I think that's helpful, Jim. And Link, I appreciate that feedback. You know, we can think of second edition too. So keep those questions and that feedback coming, and it'll be great to have this new product in your hands so that you can really send along your feedback.
Shout out to Link. He was one of our highlighted reviewer names on one of those slides. So thank you, Link.
Thank you, Link.
Now that I see your name there, that's wonderful. I also in the chat saw Jim Rosa, who's one of our representatives in Canada, who invited some of his customers to attend today. So hello to Jim and our friends in Canada. Thanks for being here today. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and give you some next steps that you can take. I want to thank you, of course, for being here today. You all have GW educational consultants who are your dedicated rep, who's your first point of contact from GW. They're able to help you with samples, quotes, online demos of any of our materials, answer any questions you have. They're a wonderful group of people and very helpful for instructors like you. So please reach out to your GW educational consultant if there's anything you need. I know Jim works with our consultant, Gail Worthman, as an example, and I know that she really enjoys helping Jim with his curriculum needs. There's the website there. If you don't know your consultant in your area, you can look up your territory and find it. Most of you have already requested an online sample. I did put the link here in case you needed it. You can go to our site, g-w.com/preview. For Jim's book, it would then be /965, and you could request an online sample. If you did in your registration form, no need to go to the website. We're automatically going to go ahead and send you the sample when it's available in June. We also have a wonderful customer service department that you can contact. And then Jim, I'll let them know, let you explain different ways that you might like to have instructors reach out to you at your email that we provide there on the screen.
Yeah, well, so I do want to take this opportunity to remind everyone that this is a first edition. With, again, the help of my editors, we tried to be as thorough as we could be and include all the tools that should be included and best practices. But it is a first edition. And so there will probably be, there are most certainly ways that it can be improved. And if you do choose to adopt this, or if you even just get the starter copy and you read it and you have feedback for me, I really, really welcome that feedback. And I'm informed by my editors that it's going to feel like no time at all before we're already working on the second edition. And so when that second edition, when that opportunity comes around to make this even better, that's where I'm really going to appreciate that feedback from folks who have read it, tried to use it, etc. And then the other thing that I want to say is, so I've now about ready to start my 5th year of teaching this dedicated hand tools class, and I'll be using my own textbook to do it. And if you find yourself more at the beginning of that road where I was 4 years ago, and you would like help putting together the curriculum for such a class, I'm more than happy to help in any way I can. So please feel free to reach out to me at that email address.